Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How are you doing this morning? You made it in. I never thought in my life as an adult person working at a church that I'd have a snow day, but last week was an official snow day. It was very exciting. My whole family was home all week, all in the house together, the whole day, every day, all day. That was so fun. My husband and I Caleb back there, wave Caleb, we used to live in Minnesota, and this snow is of Minnesota proportions. We went out the first day and we were like, home, little bit of Minnesota home. So you all survived, and we're so grateful that you are here today to worship with us. We are going to sing together, so I invite you to stand as you're comfortably able and worship with us.
His
I said, we are just so glad to have you here this morning. It's wonderful to see your face, wonderful to hear your voice and to worship with you. Would you take just a second to turn to the person next to you, greet them with a hug, a high five, a handshake. And we're so happy to welcome those of you joining us online. Of course, this is our living room, and so we hope that wherever you find yourselves, you feel the warmth and the love of this place. Before we continue to worship, I say this every Sunday, but this is our living room, and I want you to do this, but I hope that you feel the love and the welcome that is in this room, the space, the presence, the spirit that is here with us. And so as we worship, I don't know the details of what your week has looked like, but I do know that we worship and serve a God that cares, and we worship and serve a God that is present with you in whatever you've brought here. So you're welcome as you are. You do not have to change anything about yourself. And we worship and look to a God that is faithful to do in your life what he has promised. And so continue to worship with us, this God who is faithful.
You
and you're Omega. You're in the middle. You hold it all together. You are the Alpha, yes, and you're Omega. You're in the middle. You hold it all together. You are the Alpha, and you're Omega. You're in the middle. You hold it all together. You are the Alpha, and you're Omega. You're in the middle. You hold it all together. Holding on to the beginning and you're in the midst. You do. I know you hold it all together. Been there from the beginning, Lord, and you hold it all together. I know you'll be there, Lord. You hold it all together. And I believe that I will see the goodness of the Lord. I'm confident as seasons change, your faithfulness remains. Your faithfulness remains. Your faithfulness remains. Your faithfulness remains. Oh, love, oh, love, your faithfulness. Let him turn it in your favor. Watch him work it for you good. 'Cause he's not done with what he started. He's not done until it's good. So let him turn it in your favor. Watch him work it for your good. 'Cause he's not done with what he started. 'Cause he's not done until it's good. Hello, peace. Hello, joy. Hello, love. Hello, strength. Hello, hope. It's a new horizon. Hello, peace. Hello, joy. Hello, love. is not the end. Whoa, whoa. This is not the end. This is not the end. Whoa, whoa. Oh, this is not the end. This is not the end. Oh, this is not the end. This is not the end. Whoa, whoa. This is not the end. This is not the end. Whoa, whoa. We only just began. We only just began. Whoa, whoa. This is not the end. No, this is not the end. Whoa, whoa. Goodbye fear. Goodbye guilt. Goodbye shame. Goodbye pain, goodbye grave, it's a new horizon. Goodbye fear, goodbye guilt, goodbye shame. Goodbye grave, it's a new horizon. Let the light in. Won't you let the light? Let the light in. Let the light in. Shine your light on us. Let the light in. Let the light in. Shine your light on us. Let the light in. Let the light in. Shine your beauty, Lord. Let the light in. Let the light in. Won't you let the light in? Let the light in. Let the light in.
I wanted to share a poem with you this morning from this book called God Got a Dog. I think sometimes we can look for God to be so serious, and there's truth to that. But God is also funny and surprising, and our own Holy Scripture has a story where a donkey speaks. So this was meaningful to me, and I wanted to share it with you. This particular poem is called God Went to Beauty School. God went to beauty school. He went there to learn how to give a good perm and ended up just crazy about nails. So he opened up his own shop. Nails by Jim, he called it. He was afraid to call it Nails by God. He was sure people would think he was being disrespectful and using his own name in vain, and nobody would tip. He got into nails, of course, because he'd always loved hands. Hands were some of the best things he'd ever done. And this way, he could just hold one in his and admire those delicate bones just above the knuckles, delicate as birds' wings. And after he'd done that a while, he could paint all the nails any color he wanted, then say, beautiful, and mean it. Would you pray with me? God, thank you for this particular morning with these particular people. Thank you that you are always present with us, that you are always calling us beautiful and meaning it. There is no thing we can do or left undone. There is no place we could go where we could hide from your love, God. Help us to be a community of people that act as living reminders of your love for all people in all places. In your name we pray. Amen. You may be seated.
It is good to be here. Happy New Year to you. I hope it's a happy one. It's strange to feel mid. Gotcha. Kelly, I'm going to let you run this if you don't mind. Keep my voice in check. Thank you. It has been a strange week. It's hard to believe it's January 12th. It's just sort of the last few weeks on some level for, I guess, most of us, with at least weather and maybe some of the stuff that's been going around has been a little chaotic, but so it is good to be back. It's strange for me in some part. I was thinking about it just yesterday. It had dawned on me. This is sort of week 3. I haven't been up here to speak in 2 weeks previous. I'm really, really grateful to Tim Burge-Lake, one of our elders, for stepping in on December 29th. As I had mentioned then, we were supposed to be out of town, but our plans changed. Our son and daughter-in-law are moving to New Mexico. That got postponed, so I was able to be here for that. Was thrilled to hear Tim's teaching for us. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, I encourage you to go to our app or to our YouTube page and listen to that. Last week, as Kelly mentioned, we weren't here. It felt like COVID in some strange way. And so I'm glad to be back with you. And yet Pastor Grant was to be up then at that point. And so he did a fantastic job, came in and pre-recorded, and that's kind of why it felt like COVID for us. We just sort of sat here in front of a camera and pretended that there was a room full of people to have it feel as normal as possible. So I'm thankful also to Grant for his willingness to walk us into this new, interesting, thoughtful lens on time, on kairos, the opportunity, time as moment of opportunity was just so powerful. I hope that you'll listen to that as well. To just as he began the new year, it was just such good insight to start with. On that note, if you would be in prayer for Pastor Grant and his family. His grandfather passed away just a few days ago, and so he's went down to be with his family for a couple of days. I know we'd appreciate your prayers in that as well. So for me, this is in trying to think about the last literally few weeks and months to some degree into this new year. What does that mean, and how do we start the year? And from my perspective, in terms of trying to look at down the road and bring some sort of new beginning context to where we are, some of the thoughts that began to come together in my head were, this is, as many of you know, we are now into our 20th year of existence as a church. We'll celebrate that 20th anniversary this summer. And so that's worth celebrating. And I'm 20 years older. That's not worth celebrating. But it's been, as I've thought about it in this last couple of weeks, in particular coming to this point of trying to figure out sort of ultimately, there's the sense in which the last series for me was, and I sort of referenced that at the end, was sort of a step into this new sort of, I don't know how to put it, new sense of discovering who Newsong is, this new development of the continual, maybe call it next verse of the new song that has been on my mind for the last number of months, talking through some of that with elders and staff and putting some of that into pieces in this last series, pulling together where I feel like has brought me to a place of feeling like I believe this year for us will be looking back. My hope and prayer for significant reasons that I'll lay out in the weeks to come will be a milestone that we'll look back at and say this was one of not sort of the defining moment, but another significant defining moment of what this new song that God is singing here. And so I'm grateful to get to share that with you. Have been grateful. Some of you have been here since day one, 20 years ago, and so we got old together. Some of you have been here just the last few years, maybe post-COVID, during COVID. Some of you months, some of you weeks, and it's just thrilling to me always to get to be here with you. And so what I felt compelled to do was essentially walk into a series that we're calling This Is My Story. A vision series, if you would, and kind of a 2-stage thing for the coming weeks to set up, essentially, sort of 2 stages of things. The first section of that, the first part of it, will be a handful of weeks on where we've come from. And then ultimately sequence into some conversation about where I believe God is leading Newsong and in new ways of retextualizing our understanding of what it means to be followers of Christ and living that way. And so for those of you who maybe like me grew up in church, I was talking to Kelly about trying to figure out how to title this thing so that it made some sense, but also had a little bit of context to it. It was her idea to say, let's call it This Is My Story, because she and I both, and some of you did grow up in church, and that's reminiscent of an old hymn that used to sing, this is my story, this is my song. I don't know why it chokes me up. Praising my Savior all the day long. And that's been the hope and the prayer and my experience of our life together these last 20 years. So I hope that in the series, there will be, especially as we launch into it, this first part of it will be familiar to those of you who's been here for a while. I hope it'll be a refreshing sense of, oh yeah, I understand that, or no, now I get how some of these pieces fall together. And for those of you joining us in the last 2 or 3 years, maybe there's some new thought or new details added to your picture and your participation and feeling connected and part of this Newsong family. And so this is kind of the heart of where I'm headed over the next few years. Or next few years. It always feels like that, doesn't it? Freudian slip. For those of you who've, in the last couple of months, 2 or 3 months, we've had a number of people inquiring about membership. Here at Newsong, and we once a year or so do what we call a Next Step Experience, a series of classes trying to give some detail about who we are, why we do and believe what we believe, so that there's some clarity for those trying to make a decision about whether to call this place home or not. And so this series will be, and I did a series just like this 7 years ago, literally. And so I felt like 7 years was probably a good opportunity, especially on a year of a 20th celebration, to recontextualize that, to give it some finer detail, or to catch it up to speed. And so this is essentially at least this first half of the series will be much more detailed and inclusive of some of the most significant details that we cover in the Next Step Experience. I hope that you'll benefit from that as you're considering, or maybe would consider, calling this place home, calling this place your family and community. So just trying to give you some emphasis again of why I feel like it's a great opportunity to kind of walk through this together. So we talk around here often about story. We just sang about story. The great story of God is always at work in us. And so, as I mentioned, this part of the series, I want to start with this idea of where we've come from. And maybe it would be for this reason. I don't think this would be new information to anybody. You can't really know who you are until you know where you've come from. If you understand the weight and power of story shaping your life, there's a reality to that if you don't have the greater clarity you have about sort of all the influences and all that created who you are and what drives you, it's significant because everybody has a story that shapes who they are becoming. Every individual, every community. Newsong has its own story. 20 years into this story, we are not the same community in many ways that we were 20 years ago. Lots of ways, lots of reasons, some of it by intention, some of it through unforeseeable events, some of it through challenging circumstances, but none of it as a surprise to the Spirit as we've continued to rely on the Spirit each step along the way. It's always been the deepest desire. And so that's the expectation, a necessary and ongoing question of what kind of person or community are we becoming? And so, as I said, the next few weeks we'll talk about this from the perspective of who are we and sort of where we come from. And then at the end of this 5 or 6 weeks stage of that, we'll do a Q&R, as we do from time to time, which basically means it's the reminder to invite you if along the way something that I say or don't say or need clarification on, and you'd like for us to talk about that, feel free to submit a question. I mean, you can drop it in the joy boxes, just surprising you. So let's see if you're awake. In the back, I'll explain those later if you're new. In the boxes around you, you can go to the app. There's a link on the very first page of the app that says Ask Dave, and you can submit the question there. You can do it anonymously if you like that way, if that's helpful to you to want to ask those things. You can send me an email, dave@newsong-fellowship.com. I think it's in the weekly in the program that you have. So I invite you to be thinking about as I'm walking us through the next few weeks, processing some of what the things that are sort of why we do what we do, who we are becoming, where we've come from, that may raise questions or may give you some insight that you want to ask about. It's the invitation always to do that, to feel like this is, in some ways, a dialogue. So, as I did the last time, I want to open then this story, this series, by sharing some of my own story. where I've come from and some of the realities that I've learned along the way as part of the power of story for shaping who we are. And so I would say again, I learned several years ago this reality about story, and I've talked about it a lot, so it's refreshing. It's maybe not refreshing. Some of you have heard it. From some of you, this is sort of more clarity about why I talk about story so much. James Bryan Smith, author of The Good and Beautiful God, writes, "Story is the central function of the human mind. We turn everything into a story in order to make sense of life. We dream in narrative, we daydream in narrative, we remember, anticipate, hope, despair, believe, doubt, plan, revise, criticize, construct, gossip, learn, hate, and love by narrative. In fact, we cannot avoid it. We are storied creatures. Our stories help us navigate our world, to understand right and wrong, and to provide meaning. In fact, our stories, once in place, determine much of our behavior without regard to their accuracy or helpfulness." Think about that. Our stories, once in place, determine much of our behavior without regard to their accuracy or helpfulness. And once these stories are stored in our minds, they stay there largely unchallenged until we die. It has to be an intentional journey. And so science tells us we are hardwired for story. It's the way God designed us to make sense of the world around us. And so it's why it's so significant in understanding how its impact on our own lives, on our faith, on our relationships, on the way that we move and live. It's built into our DNA. It's our primary sense-making device. And here's why that matters, pulling this together. Understanding the power of story and shaping our lives is critical to not only understanding where we've come from, but for determining what story we will choose to determine who we'll become. And so I want to share with you my story. Some of you have heard it, some of those details, and I'm glad you're here, because if I get it wrong, you can correct me. I'm at that age. I was born into a family of ministry as far back as I can remember. I was born into a family where my dad was in seminary at the time, and eventually moved, graduated from seminary, pastored here in the States a couple of places, and when I was a child, we moved to Argentina. We left the country in 1969. Argentina is where I met my wife, Shelley, whose parents also are missionaries down there. We've known each other since we were about 13 to 14 years old. Met there because our parents were working together. We were back on furlough when I was in the 5th grade, which means my folks had come back for a few months, and I was attending a service that was part of a conference that my parents attended. And in our tradition in those days, from time to time, especially if it was services around missions, they would offer sort of this call to say, do you feel called to ministry, called to missions? And I remember as a 5th grader, not necessarily understanding all the sort of what that implied for the future, but feeling like the sense of like, I think, yes, I would say yes, that I am. And ultimately, at some point along the way, I would feel like that calling is to missions, and I can't explain it. It wasn't a loud voice. I was a Baptist, so we didn't really expect to hear from God. And yet it was clear to me that this was a significant part of who I was and what I was to become. And so by the time I got to high school, my folks lived in the interior of Argentina, and so I moved. They sent me to the capital, Buenos Aires, Argentina, city, this sort of like, think about it like New York, a large multi-million city. And so for me, it was a great experience, actually, to tell you the truth. Moving to a boarding school, my sophomore year in high school, was wonderful for 2 reasons. One was because I was now away from my parents, and I was grateful for that. In part because I was a sophomore in high school, set free in a town like New York, so how fun is this going to be? And secondly, because I didn't have sort of the greatest relationship with my family. I mean, I love my folks. Both of them have passed now, but I was the second of 5, and I knew early on, felt early on that I was the black sheep of the family. My older brother, who's 14 months older than me, was the one who could do no wrong, and he's a great guy, but I grew up hating him because he could do no wrong. My parents, they didn't do it all the time, but it wasn't uncommon for me to hear, "Why aren't you more like your brother?" I had teachers tell that to me, and so it was one of those things like, all right, I'm going to be the opposite of my brother. And so again, I didn't have a terrible childhood. I'm just saying I discovered early on that I have a sense of I'm the one that's going to ask the questions or call out sort of what I feel like is why would we sit down for dinner? And if Dad's mad, everybody has to be quiet. I don't get that. And it wasn't always was rarely well received. But it was part of their generation. It's part of the way that things were. It's part of the story that I grew up with, understanding sort of how parents interact and how marriages work, and much of the story that I continue to need to work on in my own life. But it was in that sense of the recognition that sort of there's a part of me that will always feel like it's me against the world, that I've got to challenge or be sort of push up against the rules. And so sometimes I've done that in ways that's helpful. Other times it's not been a smart move. But the second reason that I was excited to move there was because Shelley ended up the same boarding home as I did, and so we became good friends. Her brother's my age, same grade, and we became good friends. So Shelley was a year behind us and was like a little sister, and then just a close friend. 3 years before I graduated from high school, we began to date, thanks to her, because I was too shy to ask. And then we wrote back and forth. This is pre-internet days, obviously, and so we wrote back and forth for a year before she came back to the States. And 1983, at the end of my junior year, we got married. And so that whole journey of Argentina and growing up sort of in a different culture, but also at the same time in the freedom of this massive city and in the sort of the environment of boarding home has been really a significant, beneficial part of my story. For all those reasons, I get to have the life and the family that I do because of that. Graduated from high school, went to college in Oklahoma, was a music major in college. Far cry from the life of the metropolitan city of Buenos Aires. Was this little town that I showed up in. I didn't know anybody. My brother had gone a year earlier. I didn't know anybody. I didn't feel at home. I didn't have a car. There were no buses. There were no subways. There were no trains, as I was used to. And so Shelley was thousands of miles away. We wrote several times a week, and so I was dependent on the mailman to feel like I'm connected somewhere, somehow, to something that matters to me. At the end of my freshman year, I took my very first position in ministry in a little town called El Reno, Oklahoma, if you've ever been there. Little country church, good people, but it was sort of one of these like, this is just kind of how you get started. It's an hour away from where I lived. I'd drive early in the morning to get there. Sometimes Shelley would come along, and I was the music. It was a part-time job. I led music, so it was like full suit, wave the hand and sing the hymns kind of a thing. That was what I did for about 15 years across the variety of different churches. I don't miss those days. But the pastor would take me lunch afterwards with his family and then drop me off to the church. And so Shelley and I would sit at the church all afternoon waiting for the next event to happen because it's, we're Baptists, so we had services twice on Sunday. I'm thankful I don't do that anymore as well. But because I was a music guy, so we'd wait, sit, or take a nap on the pews because there was nowhere else to go. And so then I'd have choir practice and then service at the end and drive home at the end. So it was my first exposure and experience then into this calling of being in ministry, whatever that meant or looked like. And so, again, some benefit to that. As I mentioned, Shelley and I got married in 1983 at the end of my junior year. And for both of us, there was a sense of clarity about we feel like God has called us both to missions, to go to the mission field, in whatever context that looks like. Not necessarily defining it'll be exactly this role, but it was kind of the heart was. And so I graduated from college, began to attend seminary, and so eventually moved to Tyler, Texas, East Texas, as a full-time position of music and youth director. The pastor of the church was a former missionary that I'd known since I was a kid, a wonderful man, a mentor of mine. I just loved him dearly, was very, very gracious. And so I came in the standard combo at that time was, like I said, of music and youth. And so my responsibilities was, again, wearing the suits and leading the hymns on Sunday, and then on midweek we'd have something for the student ministry. Well, about a year and a half in, I was at seminary, heard a guy talking about a conference that he'd attended at a church in Chicago that sounded very interesting to me, this new paradigm, a new way of understanding and approaching ministry in a way that felt more sincere, felt more authentic, felt more servant-hearted driven, and seemed to be having significant impact in the environment that it was in. And so I asked him about it. I said, tell me about this conference. And he said to me, he says, Romoser, you don't want to go there. And I'm like, why is that? Because you'll come back and throw rocks at your church. Which I didn't do, but Shelley and I attended that conference together. And again, it was one of those markers for us. I'm like, feels like a much more significant, impactful, helpful way to do ministry in authentic ways, seeing and caring for the people around us in tangible kind of ways, especially in terms of student ministry, how we organize student ministry so that everybody feels welcome. Every story matters, and no matter what questions you have, this is the place that you're welcome to ask them and explore whether or not this faith is something for you, or whether you just want to come and play basketball, that you are welcome. And so we began to get a lot of high school kids in this Tyler area. We went from about 12 kids on a Wednesday night within a year to about 120. Had 30 youth workers, that couples that were older than most of them were older than Shelley and I. And so the ministry grew, was flourishing in the middle of this. It was just sort of this same journey. While that's flourishing and we're growing and learning new things, sort of the experience of trying to wrap up seminary and figure out what's it going to look like to transition into missions. This happening basically at the same time. And as I was getting to the days of wrapping up sort of my master's work, which is happening in Fort Worth, and I was driving back and forth twice a week from Tyler's, 2.5 hours one way. Life was busy. We had the 2 boys, and so Shelley's growing up trying to raise the boys with me as a full-time dad, full-time student, traveling 10 hours a week just to try to get school done. And one of the students that had begun to attend approached us and said, I want to be a member of the church. And he's a really great guy. Everybody loved him. He was a star athlete, star football player, went on to play pro football. His name was Tremaine Mack. He's a black kid with lots of talents, really smart kid, charismatic kid. When the youth would meet, the just 7th graders and 8th graders would hang all over him and laugh and play. Sweetest kid you ever met. Little did I know how significant of a bad decision that would be from the standpoint of the leadership of the church. For the first time in my life, even having grown up overseas, I encountered overt racism like I never expected. Not a hint that could happen. And so, before I knew it, we're in the throes of the power of the church, which was the deacon body, which was pretty standard in the denomination that I grew up in. We're more decision makers and servants of the church. In my experience, I'm not saying every church is that way, I'm saying that was my experience. Because we had a number of Hispanic kids, we had a number of black kids, we had a number of kids that weren't sort of the desirable kind of kids in their eyes, I began to hear that they were very upset with the growth of what was happening there. And I went to my pastor and asked him, if I'm doing anything wrong, please let me know. I'm not trying to do anything to create waves. That's, that black sheep of me has tried to just do something. And he was very affirming, said, the church is happening where you are. You keep doing what you're doing, and I'll do all that I can to sort of try to keep you protected from what's happening. Eventually, I was called into a meeting with the deacons, in which I was sort of reprimanded on a number of levels for what was happening out there. And finally, one of the men said to me, you don't know the power you would have if you would just get in line with these men in the room. And the only thing that came to mind to me was, I have no interest in the power you're talking about. And I have no interest in doing anything to threaten the church. I don't know what to tell you. And so there was this growing tension. And as I came to the pastor about it, literally within a few weeks of when that erupted, the pastor, who was an older man, he'd retired, but he was in really good health, all of a sudden got sick, went in the hospital. Within a week or so, he died. And none of us saw it coming. And I knew then, I felt strongly, this is a T in the road. This goes one way or the other. I just finished up my master's work, and all the avenues that had been on the table for pursuing the mission field at that point had dried up for a couple of reasons, a variety of reasons. We were unsure about that, just knowing there's a T in the road, and this situation here goes one way or the other. But neither one of them feels like what we'd want to have happen. So our prayer became, God, give us direction. Tell us what you want us to do. And if we know that it's you, the answer is already yes. Come what may. It's yes. And so as we prayed, I got a call from someone that I knew as a former missionary also in Argentina. He said he was a former missionary in Argentina. who called to express condolences for the loss of the pastor because he'd known him too as a missionary kid in MK, growing up as we did. Started turning into a conversation of he was looking for someone to come and play keyboard, start a band at his church. He had moved to start a church. We had been in college together as well, played some soccer together. And so I asked him where he was, and he had moved to this area, wanted to start a church. So I said, I don't know anything about I don't know what God's doing. Here's where I am. I'm not looking for a job, but I'm looking to make sure that I don't miss God's voice. We had a conversation about the possibility. I said, I don't want a job. I just want to make sure that I put this on the table. He said, I don't know. We're looking for part-time, maybe college student, but I'll ask and see. A couple of conversations later, we were planning a move to Illinois, which at the time felt like, okay, God, this is really a left turn. Like it was supposed to be Argentina or maybe Venezuela or somewhere Spanish-speaking, because we know the culture. We love the people. We'd love to raise our kids in a different culture as we got the experience to do. And it was, nope, Illinois. Thank you, Jesus, that you know what you're doing. But it's one of those, okay, so I guess missions is put on hold. But we said, God, if you know it's you, the answer is yes, come what may. And so this is a definite. We're going. We know that God is in this, and what we need will be there as we go. And so we came. So for 12 years, we participated in ministry in this church that grew from about 100 when we came to over 1,200 and 3 services. And much of that was just powerfully significant. Obviously, it's difficult at that point. We're at 3 services. My first exposure to a megachurch model. So there was a driving pace underneath it all, part of sort of what fueled sort of my experience of the reality of, we talked last series, of hurry sickness and feeding into my own workaholism tendencies that I inherited in my story. So I was responsible for multiple areas, dozens of volunteers. I was burning out, I began to realize, and coming up on my annual performance review, which was a standard thing. And so I put that on the table. I said, I'm burning out here. And I've asked if I can get interns for this or can pass this off to somebody. And again, what came back was, I just need you to step it up. And I knew then, this is another T in the road. This goes one way or another because I can't. And so all I knew to say was, my biggest fear is one day you're going to get a call that says Dave's in the hospital and we don't have any idea what to do. And my biggest fear for you is that we'd get this phone call that says you're in the hospital. Because the way the system is designed, there's little trust for the ability to pass along leadership. And so a few months later, trying to work through that, trying to stay listening to God's direction in our lives, feeling very committed to, I love what I get to do. I love the people that I get to do this with. So fulfilling. Every so often, once a year at least, our staff would read through one of the top business books of the year, just leadership principles. I understand that. We were reading through this book by a guy named Patrick Lencioni. It's called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So they talk about, these are things that a dysfunctional team should do better, or that a functional team does well, however you want to look at it. You understand the concept. And so in reading through it, I knew the anticipation because it was always an expectation. We read through this book because we're going to learn how to continue to improve, naturally. One of the dysfunctions of a team, one of the 5, is that it lacks healthy conflict. It doesn't mean that people don't ever argue. The idea was essentially this, that the best ideas always surface through the reality of healthy discussion, of disagreement, of different views and different positions to say, well, let's talk about this and sort of tease it out together and have these discussions that sometimes may feel heated, but we all want the same thing. We want the best ideas to surface so that we're moving towards, on the same page, the best possible way to move forward in this next scenario. And the structure that we were in, it wasn't how it worked. I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm just saying it was a different structure. It was a top-down power structure where all of the staff was given directives, so you're going to do this, and this is how you're going to do it. And there wasn't any conversation about sort of what do you think about this if we're going to do this as a church. It was always, here's what you're going to do, here's what you're going to do. And we knew that. And so I asked the day before we were going to discuss the book, having finally read it. So I'm assuming the goal is the same, that we're looking basically to learn from the model and be better by it. So yeah, absolutely. So when it came time, we sat down and the question was asked, so what do we think about the book? And a lot of affirmation about some of the good, solid ideas that were there. And so I made the statement. I said, I think the book has been great. I feel like we've got some room to grow, but I feel like it's been really helpful. And I felt pretty certain as soon as I did that it would begin a journey a train would start rolling. I couldn't stop, but I couldn't not do it. For the health of the church, for my own health. And so, like, what are you talking about? I said, well, the lack of healthy conflict. We don't have conflict around here. And I get the system is different, so I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's a different model. But I knew if I put this on the table, it does, as I said, there's this unspoken rule: don't ask questions, don't rock the boat. And it was another one of those affirmations that I'm the black sheep, and sometimes the rules I need to understand or question, and especially where I was at the time emotionally. And so it turned into a reprimand with given a month to sort of get in line. And the other unspoken rule is don't tell anybody about this. And so I made a decision, I'm not going to violate that rule unless somebody comes to me and asks, that's a friend, and asking caringly. I'm also not going to keep them from caring for me because our family needs it. So over the course of the next couple of months, a handful of leaders in the church came forward and said, you doing okay? And I said, if you're asking me, I'm going to tell you. But you and I both know that's not supposed to happen. They said, tell me. So I would share my story, and they'd say, man, this is fixable. We can have this conversation. I said, okay. I said, I hope so. I really do. And sometime in the next couple of weeks, apparently the word got back around, and I was called into the office and told, gather your stuff, you're gone. Turn in your computer tomorrow. So my family gathered that night with a couple of friends, prayed for the church, gathered our stuff, prayed that God would give us what he always did: direction, wisdom. And he gave us what we need when we needed it. Missions sort of seemed like, okay, maybe this is the time. This is when we go to Argentina. If that's what it is, God, yes. Argentina, Alaska, even Arkansas. If we know it's your voice, the answer is yes. Come what may. So for a couple of weeks, we'd actually had a family trip planned to New York. We'd never been. That was already on the calendar. It's just like, we're going. So we went to New York, saw The Lion King on Broadway. It was a really refreshing trip. We came back. There was a number of people who are like, how are you doing? What's going on? We resolved to not say anything to anyone unless they asked specifically, because I wasn't interested in doing any, because, if you've been around church long enough, you know church happens, and I just hate it. And I didn't want to participate in that. I certainly didn't want to generate it. But I also didn't want to miss the voice of the Spirit at work towards us, people caring for us. So our determination was, if somebody asks what happens, I'll try to explain this as graciously as I know how, without any anger or desire for anything negative to happen, as much as just we're seeking the Lord and we'll see what will happen. So in the midst of that, my family went out to dinner one night and we were talking about, maybe, Shelley and I were talking, should we, what are the options? Well, maybe you can put out your resume here. I said, I might. I said, but that's Oklahoma. I don't know that I want to go to Oklahoma. I don't feel definitely led to go back to and it's not the appearance, but the suit and tie lead hymns thing. I mean, the whole structure of that, I feel like doesn't match who I am or who we're becoming anymore. And so it's God. It's not a no. It's just I just need to know clearly. So we had some conversation, and one of the things obviously it puts on the table is, I don't know. We stay here, we move, we go to the mission field, we start a church. And so Cheryl and I were like, we did that once. It was a lot of work, 10 years in a rented building. And so, people aren't going to want to set up and tear down anymore. So long story short, we had this conversation. Cheryl and I both had sort of these word from God moments, and as Baptists, that doesn't happen. So it was significant for us. For me, it was having had someone call me and say, hey, I heard something's happening. What are you going to do? And I said, if you're asking, here's what we feel like we're leaning to do. We feel like God's leading us to stay and start a church. And so she goes, well, I'd love to look into that. I'd love to talk more. I said, I'd love to talk more about it. So I got off the phone. Later that day, I got an email from her, and she's just said, oh, by the way, we'd met with my family a week or so before out to eat, and I said, if God leads us to start a church, I have this name on mine, Newsong Fellowship. I'm a musician, and I feel like, the Psalms multiple times says, sing unto the Lord a new song, and it's in part about the fresh aspect of worshiping God. It's also part of sort of this idea of God's story is always moving forward. He's always telling a story, and I feel like there's just this sense in which this could be a fit. So we all felt like, oh, that's a really good name. But we hadn't told anybody. So I had the phone call with this lady, and that night I get the email, days after that conversation with my family. And she says, I've got a friend in, I think it's California, Colorado, C-State. And she said, I told her your story, and my friend said to me, would you give him, I have a word of the Lord from Lord for him. And again, I was like, okay, I'm listening, God. I had said, I know it's you, and then I'm listening. And she said, my friend said to tell you this. The Lord is the same, but he does new works. Sing to the Lord a new song. And I was like, okay, I heard it. I hear it. So I shared that with our family. We cried together. Felt like this is it. This is the Lord speaking. And that's how we became. That's where the Newsong Fellowship name comes from. I put all that on the table with those details to say, for mention, to come back to this idea. It's what renowned screenwriter Robert McKee calls this transition in our lives, unexpected, feeling like the rug's been pulled out from under us, and yet trying to move forward with joy and hope. And I'm so grateful those first few months of Newsong. We prayed every Sunday for this other church and for the people that were there, and God brought this joy to Newsong from the very beginning that was just so life-giving to us. But all of us had these moments where it feels like life pulls the rug out from under you, and screenwriter, storyteller Robert McKee calls it an inciting incident. And he says it this way, essentially, an inciting incident is a major event in a story that disrupts the balance of forces in the protagonist's life. The event sets the story in motion by introducing a crisis that is urgent, life-changing, and out of the protagonist's control. And I'm like, yep, I remember some of those in my life. It happened in this church, and it happened in that church, and here we are again. But everybody at some point has those. They come at some point sooner or later, often without warning. It's a cancer diagnosis, it's a car wreck, it's the crash of the market or your marriage. It's a global pandemic that takes loved ones or your livelihood. And the life that you thought you had that was supposed to go up and to the right is now off the table, at least in that format. But here's what Shelley and I have been reminded of each time it's happened. It's this: every inciting incident is an opportunity to live a better story. I mean, that's the anchor of hope of this faith, is there's nothing that comes to us that isn't for us. When Paul tells us that God works all things together for good for those who are loving him, he's not saying it means the whole journey is going to be fun. The idea there of good is, again, the Hebrew perspective of Torah, that it's going to work out for who he designed you to be and to fulfill your purpose. And the ups and the downs will bring that together because of who he is. If you're listening, if you're taking the steps towards him. And so within a couple of weeks of those words, we started this place called Newsong Fellowship, our first official service, September 11th, 2005. We're looking forward to celebrating that one this year, by the way, in a big way. So just know it's coming. But the guiding principle was always the same: to lift up Jesus. I remember central to all the things that I knew I didn't know about starting a church. I didn't know about, Shelley asked me one time, can you even preach? I'm still wondering whether that's true or not, whether I can.
We keep showing up. So.
Thank you. That's encouraging. But for me, it was very clear that the central point that it came down to was just lift up Jesus. Point people to Jesus. And everything that doesn't line up with that, it's got to be rethought. And if it needs to go, it needs to go. If that part of my understanding or that part of my own religious heritage gets in the way, it doesn't mean it's all bad. It just means it's not where I need to be anymore. It doesn't need to shape who I'm becoming, who we're becoming as a family, or this new church as a community anymore. And so it was always central to the conversations. Is this pointing people to Jesus? And is there anything in the way? Is it about the language or about the process or about its history, about what it implies, about sort of the love of God for people that gets in the way? Then let's not do that. Let's let that be somebody else's thing. It was always a guiding principle. Some of you have had your journey of sorrow as well, your own inciting incident. And you've learned what our family came to learn on the other side. That those incidents are the kind of incidents where you wouldn't wish them on your worst enemy because it was so much like death and mourning and loss and sadness for you that you don't want anybody to go through it. But at the same time, you would say, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I wouldn't. And my family, each one of them, we've had these conversations numerous times over the years, wouldn't change it for the world, wouldn't trade it. To know where we've come from, to see what God is doing, not just in us, but as we participate in this community, this family called Newsong. We wouldn't trade it for anything. The journey of these past 20 years has been, as life always is, filled with highs and lows, joys and sorrows, peaks and valleys. But 20 years in, I'm discovering that we're just beginning to find our stride. So I'm grateful to be here. Grateful to celebrate 20 years with you. I'm grateful to have an opportunity in the next few weeks to share some of the things, put it this way, things I've learned along the way. So it'd be things like this just to give you sort of a sense of where things are headed. Not that one. This one. Next week, I'm going to talk about the Bible as an authoritative narrative. I grew up believing, being told the Bible is primarily a guidebook for life, and it gives great guidance for life, but that's not its purpose. And so I want to unpack that more, how my perspective on what I believe fundamentally the Scriptures offers as a value, as the inspired Word of God to give us insight into the experience of the life Jesus keeps saying is available in Him, and how that shifted for us, and so that you can know or hear it again or hear for the first time with some clarity. This is what drives me when I'm reading through, when I'm studying, when I'm teaching what I believe is being taught from what I understand the Bible to say. It's always from this perspective of the Bible as this narrative of God's goodness and His movement in the world and what that means for us. Well, next few weeks I'll talk about the purpose of Jesus' life. That's much more than just Jesus came to die, which is what I was was the word of understanding. Sort of, this is why Jesus came. He came to die. Well, yes, but no. Throughout most of my life, there was little teaching on the reality and impact and the essence of what Jesus' actual life meant, beyond just the fact that He was the Son of God. I want to talk about the gospel of Jesus versus the gospel about Jesus. I want to talk about sort of what you've heard me say, if you've been around for any time at all, what it means when we talk about sort of how the impact of the life and teaching of Jesus means to participate in the life that He offers. We have to want more than to be just a good person, to become the kind of person through whom goodness flows, what that means and why that distinction is critical for a vibrant faith. And then discovering the life of heaven here, as opposed to what I grew up with was heaven was always just this thing of afterlife. It becomes the divider of who's in and who's out, and how much it's changed my thinking to understand what Jesus was actually talking about when He spoke about heaven. So, some idea of what's coming down the road. And I would appreciate your prayers as we walk through this together. I'm encouraged about it. I genuinely welcome your comments and questions, because this is a journey that I want us to do together. Would you pray with me? Father, we're thankful for this new song that You've been singing, that You've led us to. That You continue as we trust and lean in, Father, to guide us, because it's who You are. We're thankful for Your Spirit that is always willing, eager for us to follow, to be led. Father, continue to move us individually as families and as this family of Newsong, this community of Newsong, deeper into humility, to hands up to say to you, Father, whatever it is in my life or our lives together that you need or want us to do to be shaping our story for who we're becoming. The answer is yes, if we know that it's you. Come what may. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you, as we sang today, that fear is not our future. Heartbreak's not our home. Sickness is not our story. You are. May we be faithful to you, to your story. May we continue to find a deeper experience of life in you together. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If you came prepared to worship with some giving, we have joy boxes around the walls and online. Grace and peace. We'll see you next week. Be warm. Be safe.